And as I shared with you last week, we kind of had that outlier Sunday last week where we were just finishing Thanksgiving and not into Advent, but today is the first day of our Christmas celebration, our Christmas season, and what we refer to in the Christian faith as Advent. And I've heard people say, hey, what is Advent? What is Advent about? Well, if I could put it into a word, Advent is about waiting. It's a purposeful season of waiting that prepares us for the coming of Christ. And so this year, for the 4 Sundays of our waiting, we're going to embark on a sermon series that's entitled Hark the Herald Angels Sing. You know, angels have always been part of the observance of Christmas. You will find angels on wrapping paper. You're going to find angels on postage stamps, on ornaments, on tree toppers. We had an angel on top of our tree for years until it fell off one year when a very young Jonathan thought that the Christmas tree was something to shake. and the tree fell off, and that was the year with no ornaments on the tree. There's a reason we see angels around Christmas. There's a reason that we sing about angels at Christmas, because with probably the exception of the end times in Revelation, there's not a portion of the Bible where angels are more prevalent than the passages that are connected to the birth of Christ. And there are really no less than 4 angelic visits surrounding Jesus' birth, and each one has profound meaning in the unfolding narrative of God's work in the world, and also profound relevance for where we find ourselves today. Each angelic visit came not just to a person, but to a unique experience in life. And so in the first passage on which we'll focus, we'll listen, or we will hark, right, to the angel's words in a time of longing. You know, longing is an appropriate sentiment for the season of Advent. We've all felt that longing at Christmas at some point for one thing or another. When we were younger, you're longing to unwrap a favorite toy at Christmas. Some of you all remember a time when you were younger and you kind of had an idea of what that toy was under the tree, and you're just longing, and it seemed Christmas took so long. When is it ever going to get here? You know, things just went so long. Maybe now that when we're older, that longing is perhaps for the way things used to be, or Christmas in the past, or a holiday in the past. That unsettled waiting, that internal desire that things would be different than what they are. And so into this environment of longing, it's an environment like this that our first angel visited. It's probably the least known of all the angelic visits at Christmas, but no less important. It's the angelic visit to a priest named Zechariah. And you're going to find the narrative for this visit in the book of Luke. Actually, 3 of the 4 visits are you're going to find in the first 2 chapters of Luke. This is chapter 1, starting right close to the beginning, verse 5, and we'll read to verse 17. We'll have it up here on the screen. Luke writes, in the time of King Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. But they were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. Once when Zechariah's division was on duty and he was serving as a priest before God, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And when the time came for the burning of incense, all the assembled worshipers were praying outside. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. He will be a joy and delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth. for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He is never to take wine or other fermented drink. He will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he is born. He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God, and he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and the power of Elijah to turn the hearts of parents to their children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready the people prepared for the Lord. To me, it's so interesting because when you look at Luke, and the first part of the introduction of Luke that we didn't read, one of the things that he wrote is, hey, I've investigated, I've looked all this up, I've tried to verify things so that I can write the story of Jesus for you from the beginning, so that you can get the whole thing, all right? But if you notice, Luke's assertion here is that the story of Jesus didn't begin with Jesus. Not even Mary and Joseph. He goes further back with that. He says, if you want to know the full story of Jesus, you need to know about a couple named Zechariah and Elizabeth. And he's so careful to place all of this in historical context. And the context is important. Look what he says right up front. He says, in the time of Herod, king of Judea. So this all takes place when Herod was king. Right? Many of you probably heard of King Herod before. Many of you might have heard him referred to as Herod the Great. All right, very good. You've been to Sunday school. You know all those things. Herod the Great. Not sure that he ever applied that title to himself. It's not really confirmed that he did that. But he would have appreciated the sentiment. Herod fashioned himself as someone important. He was the king of Judea, but he wasn't Jewish. He was Idumean. He was from the south, kind of descended from the Edomites. His kingship was propped up by the Roman Empire, but was given free reign as long as he did two things: keep the population in line and keep the taxes flowing. As long as you're doing those things, hey, you're a king. And he became incredibly wealthy in his own right, and used much of his wealth to put his mark on the land, put his stamp on the land to show just how great he was. And part of it was with extravagant building projects. You got fortresses, palaces, ports, cities. He rebuilt and expanded what was known as the Second Temple. Some of you that have been to Israel, you've seen some of these places, some of these things that Herod built, and it's very impressive. All kind of in an attempt to win the support of the people and create a legacy for himself. But he's not known just for being a builder. King Herod was really a paranoid megalomaniac. He had no qualms about slaughtering the population, slaughtering children, executing members of his own family if he felt them a threat to his power. He's one of those kings that on the whole, most Jews resented him, but it was best to keep that to yourself. Don't let anybody know that. Lest you might have an unfortunate accident one day. So it was in a time of imperial subjugation under the thumb of an unstable, violent, despotic ruler. It was really a time of uncertainty and darkness in the land, which also coincided with a time of silence from God. Because if you look at the timeline between the last book of the Old Testament and where we get to in Matthew and Luke and all, it's about 400 years. Where people just haven't heard much. There hasn't been much prophetic writing. There hasn't been much going on. And Luke says that it's in this time of Herod, this time of darkness and silence, that there was this priest Zechariah who had a wife named Elizabeth, who was also a descendant of a priest. This is preacher families here, all right? And I hope you see this because it's a theme that runs through the entire Christmas story. Zechariah and Elizabeth are, for the most part, unremarkable people. Right? Zechariah, whose name means God remembers, is a priest, probably something near to a pastor. He's a country preacher in a nation with probably conservatively 18,000 priests. All right? He's married to Elizabeth, whose name means God is my oath, or God keeps his promises. They're plain, rural, everyday people. None of the higher-ups at the temple, none of the priests that were in charge of things would have had any idea who Zechariah was. And with the exception of probably their hometown or their little home region, they're anonymous and unknown. And Luke gives us really three little pieces of information about Zechariah and Elizabeth. One, they're both righteous in the sight of God. They both did life right. They're both following what God would want them to do. They're keeping up with all the requirements of the law. They're generous, they're kind, they're loved by the people. They do everything right. And there's a reason Luke puts that first. He wants you to know that because of the second thing. It says they're also childless. It says Elizabeth was bearing, which was devastating. It was devastating in that day because your child was your Social Security. Your child was your retirement. Your child was your assisted living nurse or aide. Trying to explain all this to Jonathan. Hey, you are our retirement plan, and he said, you better get another plan. That kind of thing. So if you had no children, there was no one to take care of you. That's scary. And 3, they were both very old. Now, I couldn't verify this. I've heard pastors say this before. And again, I'm just throwing it out there. I'm going to throw it out there, but I couldn't really independently verify this, that the age that was designated old, it says they were very old. To be very old, to have that designation in Jewish society, Jewish culture, was 60. All right? They didn't know that 60 was the new 40. All right? They didn't realize that, but evidently that was the threshold. You were old. It's not me, sweetheart, all right? But you were considered very old when you reached 60. That was past childbearing age. And folks, in that day, in that culture, and it's not fair, and we know differently, but to not have a child was considered a sign of God's displeasure. Right. That you'd done something wrong. Maybe people didn't know about it. That news would raise people's eyebrows. She must have sinned. I wonder what happened to them. I wonder what they did. And though she was righteous, that's why Luke mentions that, she always got the side eye when she went into town. What's wrong? Those questioning looks. And there's really, in their minds, not any hope for something different because at their age, the baby ship had sailed. Not going to happen. And so Luke kind of moves us forward. He said, so it was in Zechariah's time to serve at the temple. You got 18,000 priests. You can't really have all of them at the temple at one time. You don't want 18,000 preachers together anywhere at one time. So they would split them up into different divisions, about 750, at a time, and they would go to the temple and serve for a week 2 times a year. So 2 weeks at the temple. And it says, so once when it was Zechariah's time to serve at the temple, you see him coming in, and it's pretty clear as a priest, he brings some longings to the temple with him. He brought the longings of his spirit both on a macro level and at a micro level. He's part of this Jewish longing for a Messiah to come. And that was kind of part and parcel for every priest. They're all longing for the Messiah to arrive in this dark place in history and do something about their subjugation. Release them from bondage. Let them experience freedom. There's also a very personal level. Deep inside, there's another longing. There's a longing for a child. And perhaps at this point it's quite faint because of how old they were. And maybe he's come to accept that as that's just going to be an unfulfilled yearning. And perhaps he hardly prayed about it. Is there anything that you stopped praying about? Or you just decided, maybe that's just not it? Well, it happened that this time at the temple, Zechariah was chosen by Lot to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And this was a big deal. Burning incense was done twice a day at the temple. So, in the second holiest part of the temple, and if you know the temple and kind of how it breaks out, everybody's allowed at this spot, and the further in you go, there are fewer people allowed, so that till you get to the Holy of Holies, and there's one person allowed in there one time a year, and that's the high priest. So before you get to that room, there's one room before that that's called the Holy Place. And at the holy place, in the morning and the evening, a priest would go in and burn incense. So for a regular priest, that's as far as you got to go in the temple. That's as high as you got. And so that was chosen by lot, which was kind of a dice type thing. That was considered, that was kind of God's providence. However, the lot or the dice kind of fell out. And so 28 chances a year out of a group of 750. And for Zechariah, the same year, the same thing every time. They cast the lots, they throw the dice, providentially guided here, doesn't get picked. Next year, doesn't get picked. Next year, doesn't get picked. It's like me in PE class, all right? Doesn't get picked. Doesn't get picked ever. In decades, doesn't get picked. Doesn't get picked. Doesn't get picked. Doesn't get picked. And finally, as an old man, the lot finally fell to Zechariah. This had to be a thrill. This had to be the Super Bowl. This is as good as it got. And you only got one chance. Once you did it, you're out of the loop. All right, you don't get another shot at this. So you got to do it right. So he's excited and he's nervous. It's this once in a lifetime shot. Don't mess it up. And they got it all worked out. You remember that Seinfeld episode with the suit? You know, you step in, you order, and you step in, you step in, and you turn around and walk. So that's how you know. He's going to step into the hope. He's going to light the candle. He's going to do the incense. He's going to say a prayer, and he's going to step out. And so they practice it, all the thing, you know, so that everybody knows exactly how they're going to do it. And so while he's doing this, all the other priests are out in the courtyard just beyond this praying. All right, they're wanting him to, let's get this moving. There's marble, hurts my knees. They're all praying. They're all doing this thing. So they come to this point, and they're saying, "You got this, old man. You got this, Zechariah. Come on, you can do it." And so it's his time, and he goes in. He's going to put the incense in the altar and burn it. And we're not sure when this takes place. We're not sure if he ever got to do what he was supposed to do inside the holy place. But Luke just kind of matter of fact says that in the middle of this holy place, in a dark time, in his longing moment, an angel just appears by the incense altar. And the NIV translates what happens there. Can I give you a better translation of what happens when the angel appears? Okay, ready? Right. That's a better translation than what the NIV gives you of what happened in the holy place. Okay? And folks, that happens every time an angel shows up. That happens every time divinity steps into our time. He can't speak. He's so prominent. But the angel can. And the first thing out of the angel's mouth is this: don't be afraid. Your prayer has been heard. And I think he may be asking, which one? The prayer for our deliverer, the prayer for our Messiah, or that prayer inside. And the angel's answer is yes. Yeah. Your prayer has been heard. Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you will name him John, which translates God is gracious. God is gracious is coming. And you know who this is, right? It's John the Baptist. Folks, I say it you can't have Advent without John the Baptist. It's like 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon. You ever played that game? No matter where you get in the Christmas story, you're just a few degrees from John the Baptist. Right. Because John the Baptist is like the quintessential preparer. So when you're preparing for Jesus to come, you got to talk about John. Even if he's not even born yet, but here he is. He says, you're going to name your son John, and he will be a joy and a delight. And many will rejoice because of his birth and what his birth is bringing about and what his birth is unfolding. There's going to be, Zechariah, you've got some good seasons ahead of you. And listen to what the angel said next. He will be great in the sight of the Lord. In a world where Herod tried to convince everyone that he was great, It's the angel who says that John is the one who's going to find true greatness. And if you look at his life, folks, he never has as much money as Herod. He never builds as many buildings as Herod. He never wields the power that Herod did. But in God's eyes, John is the great one. And there's probably a sermon in there somewhere that if we determine greatness by Herod's criteria, we've gone wrong on greatness.
Yep.
We've missed it. He says he's going to be great. He's going to be really great. He said, but don't have him drink wine, and that's part of what would be considered kind of a Nazirite vow. We don't know. It's something along those lines. We don't know if he was truly taking that vow. But abstaining from that was a way to indicate that someone was set aside for a special purpose. It's a way to focus from just at the beginning, hey, you've got something about you need to be about. You have a special purpose. And he says, here's the purpose that John's going to have. This is going to be filled with the Holy Spirit early in his life, before he's even born. And he's going to bring back many of the people to the Lord their God. He's going to go before them in the spirit of Elijah in this ministry of restoration, in this ministry of redemption, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. And the angel's referencing back to Malachi, because if you look at Malachi, which is the last book in the Old Testament, in the last sentence in Malachi, one of the things that it says there is he says this, basically the translation is, I'm sending in Elijah to get things ready. I'm sending in Elijah to turn people back and restore all these relationships and get people ready. And the angel's saying, your son? That's him. That's him. I'm so thankful for what we see here, because Zechariah and Elizabeth's experience confirms that in our places of dark longing, when we feel things are silent, when all we can do is wait in that darkness, in that silence, in that longing, God is still working. And he's still working in your darkness. He's still working when it feels silent. He's still working in whatever it is that you are longing for. And that's a message for us. Amen. So far, Zechariah hasn't been able to say anything, and it's been pretty amazing. It's been a pretty cool thing. As the angel announced the work of God in and around them. And then Zechariah opens his mouth. You ever had a point where it's just better if you don't say anything? Because when it says something, I was on a date and we've been kind of quiet and it was going great, and then I said something and it was done. And so here we go. Zechariah opened his mouth and he has this little hiccup, but even there we can find encouragement. And real quick, I'm going to move through this. This is Luke 1:18-25, and we'll have this stuff here. Starting in verse 18, he says, Zechariah asked the angel, how can I be sure of this? I'm an old man, and my wife is well along in years. And then the angel said to him, I'm Gabriel, and I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not able to speak until that day happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time. Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondering why he had stayed so long in the temple. When he came out, he could not speak to them. And they realized he had seen a vision in the temple, for he kept making signs to them, but remained unable to speak. When his time for service was completed, he returned home, and after this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant, and for 5 months remained in seclusion. The Lord has done this for me, she said. In these days he has shown his favor and has taken away my disgrace among the people. Zechariah decides to say something, and again, the NIV doesn't do a great job of translating the tone here. And it's just like it when you get a text. Sometimes y'all send me a text, and I don't know what the tone is of the text that you send me. Are you upset? Are you happy? Are you scared? We just don't translate tone very well. And that's the problem here, because if we really wanted to translate this in the way that the tone probably presents it in the way the syntax does, it would probably be, man, how can I know this is for real? How can I know this is for real? My wife's old. We're old. how do I know? So Zechariah is kind of looking for a sign. All right? How can I know this will happen? But keep in mind, he's asking this question to an angel. How do you give me a sign? And I think angel responds by saying, yeah. I love what he says. I'm Gabriel. You know what Gabriel means? I'm going to see it. God is my strength. Or God is my strong arm. God, my name is all about God's strength. My meaning, my glory is all about God's strength. Hey, you're old? Yeah, you're old. God is my strength. Your wife is barren? God is my strength. Now, I stand in the presence of God. You think I'm just here with you? I'm the one you can't look at. I stand in His presence. I've been sent to tell you this. Did you hear it? Good news. He's a messenger of the gospel. That's probably another sermon. So I need to break all this out. This is what God promises will come true at the right time, at the given time, at the appointed time. God's timing, and that Greek word there is the kairos. The kairos and the right time, it's all going to work. It's all going to come true. So right now, Zechariah, it would probably be best if you were just quiet and watch for a while. You just need to watch. And that's what he's going to do for the next 9 months. He's not going to be able to speak. He's just going to be able to watch and to hear. Zechariah is not a bad guy. He's a good, and I want you to hear this, he's a good, devout priest who couldn't quite believe that God would bless him as he blessed other people in the past. He's reluctant to open his heart to it. Remember I said there was some encouragement here? Here's part of the encouragement. Here it is. Our uncertainty doesn't thwart the plans that God has. Our uncertainty doesn't thwart the unfolding plan of God. But sometimes our uncertain voices need to be quieted so the noise doesn't distract us from what God is doing. Some of you met Charlie Joe Green, a dear friend of mine, missionary to Belize. He's been with us before. Many of y'all have been to Belize and been part of their ministry down there. He told me a story once, and I may have told this to you before, where they were trying to build a baby wing at a little hospital down in Punta Gorda, which is the south end of Belize. And they were waiting because they were short of money. And he'd go around to places and nobody was given, and he'd go around and make the spiel and nobody was given, and he's just about to give up. And there was one Sunday night, he was going to a small country church somewhere in South Mississippi, and he just didn't want to do it. I don't want to do this anymore. And he passed a McDonald's, and he's like, man, I can't wait to get done and drive back to that McDonald's. And so he gives the spiel all the time, thinking about the McDonald's he wants to get back to, because there's 12 people there. There's not anybody going to go. He goes through the spiel, and he's got a slideshow, and he shows up. So now he's packing all this up. And a farmer in overalls came up to him afterwards. He said, Charlie Joe, how much do you think that thing's going to cost? And Charlie Joe's not even looking at him. He's just putting stuff. He said, that's going to take about $10,000. He says, well, I want to help. I'll do some of that. And so this farmer in overalls pulls out a big wad of money. And some of y'all know the farmers, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Pulls out a big wad of money, takes the rubber band off, and just starts counting out hundreds. And he lays down $5,000, $100 bills. And all Charlie Joe said he could do was just watch. He couldn't say anything. And it was all he said, it was like God was saying, don't speak. Don't speak. You just watch. Watch how it will work. And then in the car on the way home, as he's processing all of that, before he even gets to McDonald's, he gets a call from another guy that's part of the church ministry. He says, hey, are y'all still building for that hospital? He's like, yeah. He says, well, We took an offering and we got $7,000 we want to give to that. Hello? Hello? You there? You there, Charlie Joe? Hello? Speechless. Now I think God stopped Zechariah from talking, not really to punish him. Not even to give Elizabeth a break. Maybe it was appreciated. But I think Zechariah is silent to create space for God to work with him in a way that he could hear it, and could see it, and could consider it. And we got to get going, because meanwhile, back at the temple, people are getting nervous. Evidently this doesn't take too long, and they're all praying, and they're like, "Where's Zechariah? Where's Zechariah? What's going on?" And finally, Zechariah comes like busting through the doors, and he's got his hands in the air and the legs trembling like he's like dancing to a hip hop song. He's like, "Hey, ho!" Saying, "What's all going on? What's happened, Zechariah?" And so he's trying to explain it. He can't talk, and they're like, "What? Slow down!" And they realize everybody knew something sacred and special had happened in there. But it's dinner time. So, we all move on. They all go on to different things. Zechariah finishes up. He can't speak. He can't say anything. And he goes home. And before too long, Elizabeth is pregnant. I don't know what it is about God that he's so fascinated with old, pregnant, and I see some of y'all thinking in your, what if you were pregnant right now? And you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, this is," but that's not Elizabeth. That's not Elizabeth. The next 9 months, really, Elizabeth lives out what Advent's all about, this exciting anticipation of God's unfolding work. And you can hear it in Elizabeth's voice. It sounds like a heavy weight's been lifted off of me. Wow. Experiencing God's favor in this ways. Can't believe it. A son is coming. A son who would prepare people for the one who would change everything. Perhaps that's a good place to start our Advent waiting, by considering our longings. Sometimes we just push them down. What is it that you're longing for? That you're yearning for? Longing for God to work in your life in some way. Longing for God to restore a relationship. Longing for God to bring peace and restoration in your situation or the situation of a loved one. Watching the news and longing for God's love to touch more of our broken, very broken world. Perhaps there's something in your life that you were praying about at one point, and now you've just about stopped. That is just a faint whisper in your heart. Perhaps you have a large world longing for God to work and a personal longing for God to work, just like Zechariah and Elizabeth. It can be hard when the time seems dark or silent. In the longing time, Advent teaches that we don't have to lose hope. That God works in the Kairos time, in His time, in ways that we may not even expect or realize. Zechariah and Elizabeth's names remind us of that, confirm it to us. In Advent, we come to know God as a God who remembers, a God who keeps His promises, a God who is both watchful and faithful. Let's pray. Father, we're thankful that your presence shines light into our darkness, that your voice speaks to the silence of our longings. You hold us in our uncertainty. Help us, Father, in this Advent season, as we begin to prepare for our Christmas celebrations, to be reminded again and again that you are a God who's at work in the dark, in unexpected places, in an inconspicuous people, to see your divine plan unfold in our history. And we ask this in the name of Jesus. Let me ask you to stand up for just a moment. And maybe today, just where you are, is it time, and we'll let the room be silent, And there may be a longing that you've held for a while, and maybe it's something that's become so faint that you don't even think about it as much anymore. I'd invite you today to maybe bring that longing up again to God, or whatever it is that's yearning in your heart. Or maybe you have a yearning and you don't even know what it is that needs to fill that. What satisfies it? Because I guarantee that God does. And that even when it feels silent and even when it feels dark, it doesn't take away from the truth of what we believe in our faith, that God is working. And if I know that God is working, if I believe that God is working, I can walk with that uncertainty. And maybe that's what you need today, is to walk with that longing, or walk with that uncertainty. But whatever it is right now, I want you to take some time, just let the room be silent, and let you have the conversation with God. The Spirit is looking to change some people's lives. The Spirit is looking to put some people on a new path. The Spirit is looking to draw people into the love of God. So maybe that today is you. So whatever it is that you need to have a conversation with God, have that in this time. Father, I thank you so much that your Spirit is doing work, and it always does when we gather to worship, whether we realize it or see it or not. And I just thank you that Advent allows us not just to suppress our longings or keep them to ourselves, but to be truly and totally transparent and open to you. And we just ask that during this time of Advent and waiting, that we might be reminded again, even if we don't see it, even if it seems silent, that you are working right now. We thank you for those who have given offerings and for all that is given, and just ask that you would take it and bless it and multiply it and use it to continue the ministry and things. And just thank you for that, and we trust you as we walk forward in Jesus' name. I'm going to ask you to sit down just for a second today. Just a few extra things. In your worship guide, there's a list of the things that are going on this month. There's a lot going on. We've already talked about blessing bags and sent out information and things about that, but many of y'all know the drill with toiletry items and toothbrushes and those types of things. There's a table back in the fellowship area that you can bring that, and you can just leave it there and donate it there. We've got two, they're going to put them together on the 17th, just because of the way that the schedule falls. So we got 2 Sundays to get that done. So we need to blitz in and get them lots of stuff to get their blessing bags put together, so remember that. Next Saturday, our students are going up to the Devon Ice Rink and skate around a little bit, drink some hot chocolate. It may not be very cold that day, but we'll Christmas it up as best we can. So I've got the sign-up sheet. If you want to skate, you just need to pay me $10 and you're good to go, and you bring whatever you want. We're going to eat at Brahms on the way up there. So got today and Wednesday to sign up for that. We got the Agape lunch happening. I think we have all of our food, or pretty much all of it, for that. So if you're willing to help, we'd love to have you. On the back side is our Christmas schedule for this year. And this is kind of a different year in that Christmas Eve is on a Sunday. And the last time that this happened in 2017, what we did is that we decided just to continue with our morning worship and not have our evening worship. That when you have so many volunteers, you can squeeze one worship in that day, but probably not 2. And most people on Sundays are used to being up at 11 and at worship. So Sunday morning at 11 will be our worship that day. And then for the evening, sometimes people never get to attend with their family at another Christmas Eve. So, we don't bless you to do that. Or if you need that time to get ready for whatever, dinners or Christmas or whatever else you're blessed, we want to bless you to do that too. So 11 o'clock that day. This is the day that we also kind of introduce our New Haven Christmas offering. And this year, again, it's going to be Life Impact International, which is a group that works with child trafficking, confront human trafficking by working to prevent people from being exploited, rescuing and healing those who have already been victimized. And we have a small video just from one spot where they work in Brazil that you can kind of see part of the work that they do.
Hello, my name is Lana Vasquez, founder of Life Impact, and I am currently in the City of God, standing in our soccer project in one of the most dangerous favelas in Latin America. In this project right now, we currently see 120 boys weekly. So we are giving them a hope and a future. We're remodeling this project right now. We had dear friends that gave us money to remodel this field. The kids are praying for grass. We're going to remodel it to reach even more kids. And we just really believe that we are transforming one of the most darkest communities of the world, and we are bringing light into the area. These children, they're getting a way out, they're getting a hope, and we believe that there's another one in these 120, that there's another one that can have a way out, an option, a hope, and a future. And you're a part of it. You're a part of changing lives and changing the world with us. And so thank you so very much, and thank you for being a part of this.
Brazil is just one of the places where Life Impact works, and so if you would like to give to that offering sometime during the Christmas season, you can grab one of these offering envelopes in the pew and just write, Christmas offering, Life Impact, whatever, one of those two, and just place it in the basket. We'll collect through probably the first week in January or so. So we've got plenty of time to do that and be a part of a great ministry of restoration, which is so appropriate for us to support during Advent and during Christmas times. It has been wonderful to worship with you. I'm going to invite you to stand up, and as we go from this place, may you go with the promise that in dark and quiet places, God is working. God is bringing redemption. And in His timing, we've already seen it. We'll see it again. And I believe that you, some way, somehow,